Going to start our meeting off with a prayer.
Can we all rise and bow our heads? Lord, as we gather here together, please help us to remember to be gracious for receiving your many gifts. Please give us all the strength to unify our group and to be tolerant with our shortcomings. When we go to the polls on Tuesday, give us a clear head to vote for the candidates that you would pick as the best choice to move our nation forward. Bless President Trump and forgive his shortcomings. Help him move this country forward. We need to give him the people that will help him do this. Lord, forgive those that are working against us and ruining our great society. We need to get our country back to our Christian foundation by putting you back in the schools. Lord, protect our police that are put in harm's way every day. And please help us come up with a solution to the illegal immigrants so they can exist in their own country. We know this is a lot to ask, and our nation has not been adhering to your word as we should. Forgive us all and help us put you back into our lives. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just have one announcement to make. Yesterday was Peace Officer Memorial Day, and this week is Police Week of Service. We observe that the peace officers who have died and who have been disabled in the line of duty. May we take a moment of silence to honor them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a packed agenda. We're behind schedule already, so I'm going to go through BCP stuff very quickly. First of all, we are looking for additional locations to put up 4x8 signs, our smaller signs that promote Berks County Patriots. We're also looking for people to put the lettering on those signs. So if you know of anyone who has a location, are willing to do some lettering, I certainly would appreciate that. I do want to let you know that we have one of our members who has agreed to put lettering on 25 campaign signs on both sides. That's 50. That's fantastic. So I'm hoping that at least one or two of you can help do some larger signs. We have our 50-50 raffle. We will have the drawing at the end. We had our drawing last week on the gun raffle, which we have. Helen McMinn was the winner of that. We started another raffle all over, so we do have the tickets in the back for you to pick. Now, folks, as I mentioned before, we use the raffles in order to reduce or at least offset some of our costs. Unlike some other groups, we do not have a yearly membership fee. So whatever we're going to do in any of our programs, we must do at these meetings. We must do through the raffle tickets or any contributions that you can send in. And we do appreciate some of you that have sent contributions in. So any raffle tickets you purchase, we certainly appreciate that as well. Also, Ed's not here tonight, but usually when he is, he has T-shirts. So if you could buy those as well, it would be helpful. About a week and a half ago, I think it was May 6th, several of us went to Harrisburg for the Second Amendment rally. It was fantastic, folks. The rotunda was totally loaded. It was overflowing. The steps, the balcony, people could not get in. And let me tell you, if inside the rotunda you cannot carry, outside you can. If there was anybody interested in doing us harm, that they could not have done it. We had an army outside protecting us, and I mean an army of everything you can imagine. And one of the protectors is here tonight. Where the heck is he? Fred Zincraft, where are you, Fred? Fred, where? Oh, thank you. That was one of our protectors, so thank you very much, Fred. By the way, there are some crazy bills in Harrisburg, and that's something we need to talk about at a later meeting. We have a new candidate who just decided to run for office a week ago, so I'm going to mention his name. Actually, it's our neighbor. It's Dan Tobias. Dan, wave your hand. He's running for superintendent in Berks Township. The only reason I'm bringing him up, we all bring him through the candidates, this just happened a week ago, so he's going to need to be a write-in vote. So if you live in Berks Township, as I do, if you want to help him, please do so. At our March meeting, we had attorney Simon Grill. He gave a 45-minute preview presentation of his 3-hour presentation on stand your ground, castle doctrine, and basic self-defense. Many of you were so impressed with his presentation that you had asked if he would do a full presentation. We talked to Simon. He will consider it. However, first of all, we need to find out how many people are interested. We will not have it at one of our monthly meetings, as it looks like we are booked for the year. We're not sure if it would be in the evening or Saturday morning. There could be a slight fee. We're not sure. So there's a lot of uncertainties. The only thing I want to do tonight, we're passing clipboards around, is to see if there's a strong interest. Once we see how many people there are, we'll decide if we're going to pursue it further. I do want to tell you, you do not have to own a firearm to go to the class of the presentation. First, you don't know whether at any time you find yourself in a situation where a gun certainly would be helpful, maybe a knife, maybe a baseball bat, maybe a frying pan. You need to know your rights and responsibilities depending where you are. You at your home, you can be on the mall, you can be on your lawnmower, you can be anywhere. So my point is, you don't have to own a firearm to attend this particular class. So please let us know what kind of interest you might have. Now, folks, later on, as a matter of fact, they're working on putting the screen together. Our featured speaker is going to give you an excellent presentation on socialism. Several of us already saw it, and it is fantastic. I'm going to make a couple comments tonight on the subject as well. Socialism has already destroyed our country. Socialism has already failed in our country. Let's go back 400 years to Plymouth Colony. 1621 and 1622, they barely produced enough food to survive. Their governor, William Bradford, basically stated, the communal aspect of the colony was discouraging many of the colonists from working hard because they felt they were working for others rather than themselves. Well, folks, that is socialism. That is why socialism will always fail. In 1623, the very next year, they abandoned the system. They divided the land and houses among themselves, and so they could reap the benefits of their own labor. It worked so well, folks. When a new plan was put into place, the colony suddenly began to flourish, and they soon had an abundance of food. Corn production dramatically increased, and famine was averted. All of this is in William Bradford's journal, including his Thanksgiving proclamation, which I wonder how many of you know that he actually had. It was really our first Thanksgiving proclamation. I'm going to read just part of it. All gather on ye hill between the hours of 9 and 12 in the daytime, and listen to ye pastor. Thursday, November 29, 1623, and render thanksgiving to ye Almighty God for all his blessings. Folks, this was the first Thanksgiving proclamation. Are you taught that in school? I wonder.
Sam,
Yes, sir.
you're really loud.
Okay, thank you. Now, folks, we don't have to go back 400 years. We can go right here to the Indian reservations. Let me quote to you James Watt. He's a former Secretary of the Interior. He stated, if you want an example of the future of communism, don't go to Russia. Come to America and go to the Indian reservations. Now, this is a person that knows because he was in charge of that area. Let me further read to you the mission statement of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, which the federal government created in 1824 to oversee the Indian reservations. I quote, to enhance the quality of life, to promote economic opportunities, and to carry out the responsibilities to protect and improve the trust assets of American Indians. Well, my next question is, how do you think they did? I think we all know how they did. I think the Indians certainly know how they did. A few facts. American Indians have historically lived in extreme poverty. American Indians have the highest poverty and unemployment rates in the United States. Electricity and running water are scarce in most rural areas. About 40% of Navajo Nation members don't have access to running water in their homes. Suicide among American Indians, both attempted and completed, is more prevalent than in any other racial or ethnic group in the United States. The list goes on and on. Folks, socialism will always fail because socialism destroys the will of the producers. Okay, I'm just about done with my part, I believe. I think I went through that pretty quickly. Okay, yes. Carol, where's Carol? Carol Bernecki's up next. She will give us our Constitution minute.
Okay, tonight, I may wander around a little bit, but stick with me, it'll all come together. You know there's a controversy. We're doing a census next year, and President Trump wants a question on there, are you a citizen? And of course, Democrats don't want that question on there. So they're taking them to court over it. We'll see what happens. That's important because our representation is based on our population of citizens, not people that are here illegally. And so if we don't know if you're a citizen or not, then all the people get counted. And so the people that have lots and lots of illegal aliens living in their states are going to get higher representation. Now, this goes back quite a ways. Did you know that before 1912, we didn't have an income tax? Before that, they made their money with tariffs. Another thing President Trump's fighting to reinstate or bring up, so it brings in more money to the government. Okay. The 16th Amendment changed all that. The 16th Amendment brought forth income tax, and it also changed something else. When tariffs didn't bring in enough money, the states were assessed to pay the remaining debt based on population. So however many people in your state, you paid that percentage of the bill. That's how they raised the rest of their money besides tariffs. So when they did an income tax, that all went out the window. So population was important then too. Another thing happened way back. When they wrote the Constitution, there was a big hassle about should we count the slaves or not. The southern states wanted to count the slaves for the population so that they could get more representation in Congress. But then when it came to paying that tax that was based on population, they didn't want to count the slaves for the tax. How about that? So, that is the reason they made a compromise. And that is the reason they decided to count the slaves as 3/5 of a person. That way the southern states didn't get to count them all for representation, but they also didn't get to delete them all for paying taxes. So when you hear people saying that we counted them as 3/5 of a person because they were demeaned, or we didn't think that they were human, or that's all a lie. It was just about population and money. Follow the money. Yeah. So that brings us to today. We need this question on our ballot, are you a citizen? We need our representation based on citizenship. And we need to be able to identify when a person comes into the polls next Tuesday if they're a citizen or not. In Pennsylvania, we are not allowed to do that right now. We tried, our legislature tried to make a person show that they were a citizen. A judge knocked it down, said it was not constitutional. They have not tried since to write a better bill or whatever. But, so just think about it. All these things are intertwined. And we do need President Trump to get that question on the census. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. This woman really knows the Constitution. Okay, folks, up next is Sally Graff. And let's see, Sally, what do we call your program here? Happy Report or something? Okay, come on up. Okay.
Something good.
We'll let the people decide.
Okay, how many of you remember your first paying job? Okay, now how many of you delivered newspapers? All men. Okay, you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this.
No, I'm a woman.
Oh, where? Okay. Who did I miss? Oh, wait, okay.
I'm a big woman.
You're gonna really like this. Okay, this is written by a lady, her name is Pat Cook. And this was written when she was 12, this was when she was 12 years old. The year was 1948, and I was 12. I was an energetic young girl. I babysat, cut the neighbor's lawn, and shoveled sidewalks in the winter. But I wanted a regular job with regular pay. My brother had a paper route with the Columbus Citizen, and his route manager asked him if he knew anyone who wanted a morning group delivery, the Ohio State Journal. I'll do it, I said eagerly, but back in those days, girls did not have paper routes. The manager just shook his head and walked away. 2 weeks later, he came back and offered me the job. With the wisdom of years, I now realize he was tired of getting up to throw the papers himself and could find no boy that was willing to get up at 5 a.m. to deliver newspapers. I was ecstatic. But of course, the fantasy was a lot more appealing than the reality. The first 2 weeks, I did great. I set my clock, and I had all those papers out by 6:15. But then I began to wake up, not to my alarm clock, but to the pounding on the door as my manager tried to wake me without waking the entire neighborhood. Some days the clock would wake me, and some days the manager did. But I got those papers out. Then winter came. Winter is often a nightmare in Columbus, Ohio, and sometimes I had to use my sled for deliveries. Some days my dad had mercy on me and drove me around in the car. When Christmas approached, my manager came to me with a stack of ink blotters. They pictured a delivery boy, of course, carrying his newspaper bag, but there at the bottom of the blotter was my name in print. I couldn't believe my eyes. I never felt so important. I gave one of those precious blotters to everyone in my group, and they gifted me with money, cookies, and even lifesaver candy in a neat box that was shaped like a book. I was so proud of those blotters that held my printed name. By spring, though, I had to give up my paper route. I was falling asleep at my school desk. My manager thanked me for my good work. Always remember, he told me, that you were the first girl ever to have an Ohio State Journal paper route. I didn't forget, and I've always kept one of those special ink blotters to ensure that I won't. Here's the question. What 12-year-old today would do that?
1-year-old would do that.
Come on, Sam. I stepped my 2 minutes. Come on, Sam. Oh.
I didn't get a picture of you.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay. Okay, folks. Folks, up next, first I want to let you know, for those of you who don't know, Commissioner Linebaugh has sponsored tonight's meeting, our May meeting. Now, he has sponsored many meetings in the past, including 2 this year. He's a strong supporter of the Berks County Patriots, both financially and otherwise. So, folks, anybody who sponsors our meeting is welcome to take some mic time. We're certainly going to turn the mic over to him. I'd like to have you all welcome Christian and thank him for being our sponsor. Christian Linebaugh.
Thank you very much, Sam. If you notice, it's towards the end of election cycle. I'm losing my voice. I think it's actually from a cold that I'm over, but dealing with this. So apologize for the raspy voice. I'm here tonight to touch on 2 things. Number 1, to promote strongly the new conservative Republican team for County Commissioner Michael Rivera and Christian Linebaugh. In the back, I have, my wife is back there, many of you know her, she's holding up one of the Rivera Linebaugh signs, Jennifer. And somewhere, Jack Gumbach, who is, oh, here it is right here. Jack Gumbach is the campaign manager for Michael Rivera. Our campaign is very simple. We believe that Berks County can be stronger, and there's 3 things to remember. S-T-A. It all starts S with spending. If you don't have your fiscal house in order, eventually nothing else matters. Our fiscal house is in the strongest position it's been in the history of the county. Number 2, it's about taxes, T for taxes. We have come out very strongly, and I know Commissioner Scott put an ad on the at 8:30 a.m. Challenging me on saying you can't do anything about school property tax. Well, let me tell you something, that's not true. We can lobby and we have a voice as county commissioners, and we see the impact that school property tax has on the people that we represent. As long as there's school property tax, you don't own your property, you rent it from the government. We also are the only team that supports the County Commissioners Association plan that would allow counties to eliminate county property tax and replace it with a sales and earned income tax. Number 3 is economy. We need to continue to grow jobs in the economy. You've heard me say this before. We in the government do not create private sector jobs. The private sector creates jobs. It galls me when I hear a politician get up and say, I brought 10,000 jobs to Berks County. What government does, they either are a help or a hindrance to economic growth by the tax and the regulatory policies. We need to continue to fight to keep our county taxes low and to make sure that we do everything we can to help with the regulatory environment. Michael and I have been out on the campaign trail. Tomorrow night, we will be at the Geigertown Fire Company with a town hall from 6:30 to approximately 8 o'clock. On Saturday night, we'll be at Hyde Park Playground in their community room from 6:30 to 8 o'clock with another town hall. This will be, I believe, our 7th town hall that we've held throughout the county. We care about our community. That's why we're out. The reason I'm out in the community is because I do not believe I can represent you or anybody else sitting in an office on the 13th floor and never interacting with the people that are working here. Look, I've spent most of my life in the private sector. I've been in the private sector until I left the private sector in 2007 and was elected. Mark Scott has been in county government for nearly 30 years. That's long enough, and I will tell you, he has forgotten who it is that he represents. He sat here a month ago and told you he doesn't do ribbon cuttings, he doesn't do community events, he does the job of the county commissioner. He doesn't even show up on a regular basis for that job. The final thing I want to touch on is a piece, some of you may have seen the story this evening on WFNZ. It will be in the Reading Eagle, I'm told, tomorrow. But today, 7 legislators, supposedly, their names are on the top of the press release, 7 legislators, Barry Joswiak, David Maloney, Jim Cox, Gary Day, Brian McKenzie, Mark Rossi, and Tom Calagione were on the header of a press release that said, shining the light of truth on the Berks funding issue. It doesn't name me, but in the very beginning it quotes me as saying, when you look at the history of Medicaid funding for county nursing homes over the last 12 years, and you've heard me talk about this, the rate of increase has been 7.7% total in that 12-year period. Inflation's been between 19 and 20%, healthcare inflation about 30%. You can only reach one conclusion, that is that the state wants to knock county nursing homes out of business. The press release went on to say that's completely false, that the Berksheim is flush with cash. They don't use that term. They say that the money that we receive is an economic boon. We don't need a Medicaid rate increase. Well, I got that letter from the Reading Eagle 20 minutes before the commissioners' meeting. I gave it to our CFO. I read it in the commissioners' meeting this morning. Without emotion, without any accusations, I read what it said. It endorsed Mark Scott big time. And then I asked our CFO to address it, and he did. He said, it's not true. The issue, day one, that caused this was the failure of the Commonwealth to properly fund Medicaid reimbursement. We didn't set this system up. The Commonwealth did decades ago, and they've not held true to what they committed to. And the only thing that will fix us going forward, long term, is the Medicaid reimbursement. Bob also noted that we will, with all of the additional funding, including the union deal, in 2022, we will start running an annual deficit at the Berksheim. 2022. Folks, we need to hold everybody accountable to the truth. Now, I don't know the circumstances under which those names were placed on that release. I have found out from the Eagle that the source of the release was the press secretary for Representative Dave Maloney. I have also found out that since the release has come out, Representative Mark Rossi and Representative Calagione have asked their names to be pulled from it. I have not heard from any of the others, but here's the reality. Truth matters. Everything that I have ever told you has been the truth. When I look at these issues, the Berksheim, constantly I go to our CFO. I go to PACA, which is the association that represents counties with nursing homes. I go to CCAP. I want to get the data. I don't want to share things that are wrong. I said the truth. And it is a little shameful that at the 11th hour, something like this would come out, attacking me, not by name, but by quote. And I thank God that I had the opportunity to expose it on television. Probably tomorrow, BCTV will have a link up to the program, and you can watch. Mark Scott did not say a single word. He didn't refute a single thing our CFO said. You may not always agree with what I have to say, and that's part of the American system. But I have never lied to you, and I will never lie to you. This is our country. This is our county, and we care about it immensely. And when you lose any sense of truth, there's nothing left. Let me close with this. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from former United States Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming. Many years ago, he said, if a man, and I'll add a woman, has integrity, nothing else matters. And if a man or woman doesn't have integrity, nothing else matters. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Christian.
Where's Sam go? There he is.
Okay.
Yeah, look for Sam.
And thank you again, Christian, for being our main sponsor. Folks, it seems like it's more important to vote for federal and state candidates. However, our local officials affect our daily lives much more so. So please get out there next Tuesday, the 21st, and vote. First of all, I know that all of you people will vote. So really what I want to add to that, not only you go out and vote, bring your neighbor, bring your friends or relatives, but please get out there and vote. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, you are in for a real treat. You know how you hear from time to time how famous entertainers got their start, you know, how they were discovered? Well, a few weeks ago, Linda and I were out having dinner at this Italian restaurant with a few friends. Actually, there's like 100. Well, I hope they were all friends. While we were eating, there was an announcement made. The entertainment is about to start. So I'm thinking, what entertainment? Then I realized, that's what the $10 cover charge is for. Actually, I thought it was for an open bar. I was disappointed. But actually, not for long. Out comes this dynamic duo. Folks, we were told that this was going to be their first performance. That's not the thing. Worldwide performance. And they decided to do it in Berks County, Pennsylvania. How privileged were we? Well, folks, it really was fantastic. They got a standing ovation. And at the end, I just had to go over and talk with them and see if they were willing to do their second worldwide presentation at the Berks County Patriots. And they agreed. Now, I want you to be quiet, listen to the words very carefully, and I want you to welcome Thea Reese and Bonnie Stock performing on the stage name of
The trumpet.
Trumpets. Here, trumpets, folks.
Your bulletin said the trumpets. We are the trumpets. So, anyway, trumpets. So anyway, are you ready, Bonnie? 1, 2, 3. There she goes again. She thinks she's Marilyn Monroe, hence the hair, singing the wrong song to the wrong president in the wrong era. Okay, so are you ready to get serious? Okay, hit it.
Bum 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 bum.
Bum 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 bum. Mr. President, build us a wall, make it shiny, sturdy and tall. Have it so folks can't jump over. Tell them the free ride is over. Mr. President, we're all alone. Don't have a Congress to call our own. We're so tired of leftist dreams. Mr. President, say the victory. Mr. President, the swamp must be drained. personal gain. Cut the deep state with determination. Send Chuck and Nancy on a long vacation. Mr. President, we will survive because fake news is barely alive. Look at the coverage of collusion. It's all an illusion. Mr. President, send out a tweet. Inform the them they're gonna get beat. Safeguard our nation's daughters and sons. Oh yeah, protect our guns. Mr. President, you're tried and true. We know you love the red, white, and blue. You're so strong and in command. Sadly, this song's about to end. Mr. President, we're on your side. 2020, a Reagan landslide. Turn all those blue states red. Mr. President, Mr. President, make America great again.
What did I tell you, folks? Weren't they fantastic? Now, I did speak with them. They will stay at the end of the meeting. They will give autographs. I'm not sure if they're going to charge anything for it. Okay. That was really great.
Don't forget, we want to sing God Bless America.
At the end, yes, I can give instructions. Okay, folks, up next is our legislative chairman, Rodney Miller. Are you ready, Rod? Just want to make sure. If you recall a little time ago, you'll go into this, we passed a anchor baby resolution, and that's what Rod wants to talk to you about. As soon as he comes up here, he's making final tone, making final adjustments to his notes. I am having trouble with my papers. Let's all welcome Rodney Miller.
We're running behind schedule, folks. I was given a pressured 4 minutes to say what I had to say, so hold all your applause to the end. I don't want to waste any time. Anyway, I thought it was on a hiatus. He told me last month I got a hiatus. I want to know, did it start yet? Did I miss it? Or did it start yet? Anyway, I believe you all recognize that the immigration system we have in place is absolutely insane. And if you consider the DC swamp, I think the whole DC is insane. Need that debate. I watched the video this week. I sent it to some other folks. A video with the likes of Schumer, Pelosi, yeah. Feinstein was on there, and Obama was on there. All of them had the same, it was like singing out of the same hymnal. And all of them said, we need to secure the border. That was in 2014. Mr. Trump's our president now, they changed their tune. Why do you think that happened? Their only goal is, they gotta get him out of there. Nothing else matters. Security in this nation, whatever. Not important to them. Anyway, while they all say it's Trump's fault where we are, the fact is, for 8 years, this festered, and now that Trump's in there, now it's his fault that it festered that long. If digressing a little bit, but we have what we had initially, a representative republic, and things may seem to be moving along quite smoothly. Then came Trump to upset the apple cart, and we're now reading or hearing about the DC corruption. We hear it every day. The swamp is really so deep and so wide that I can't see it being drained in my lifetime. But that's where we are. The Democrat challengers to the president, all 20 whatever of them, each other for our free stuff. And those of us that will be paying this bill are pretty ripe for someone to come along as, in effect, a dictator to say, we've had enough. Well, we've spent years just tweaking our government on election time, putting some in, some out, except now, it's a little bit different now, because what we do in 2020 is going to be important, because if 2020, the free stuff gang takes over the White House, even the Senate, or retains the House, what do you think is next? Revolution for those that are going to be paying the bill? If you think about the history of governments, you go from a democracy, you go to corruption, then you go to socialism. We're heading there. Then you end up with a dictator, and then you go back to a revolution, and then you're back to a democracy. That's the cycle. And there's no getting around it. You can check it out. This is just where we're going unless we make a sharp turn. Well, anyway, nothing much to do with illegal immigration, but that whole gang in Washington is all part of the problem. And it's the one issue that's dividing this country. I think the DC battle of words for both parties, it's mostly the Democrats. It's not about us, it's about them. The Democrats are looking to gain power. Republicans are eager to hold on to it. But the Democrats, they have no soul on how they're going to accomplish this. You've seen the reports, no collusion, no corruption, doesn't matter. Looking at another target now, going after tax records, and if that doesn't work, they're going to go after something else. But they'll keep going up until 2020, and one of these free stuff candidates will end up at the top of the pile, and that's who's going to be running for president. The problem is multifaceted in the problem with illegal immigration. We know there's the DACAs out there, and the Dreamers, overstaying visas. All of these, to solve any of those, would require massive deportation. Well, we attacked one issue that would not require massive deportation, and that's dealing with one of those problems, which is anchor babies. And anchor babies caused me to write a resolution and look at the history of the problem. And background is where we are with this resolution, that if you recall, those that were here in February on the 14th, unanimously passed the resolution on anchor babies. And the anchor baby resolution, while it's 2 pages long discussing the history, the bottom line was supporting an amendment to the Constitution of the United States requiring either one parent to be born in America or be a naturalized citizen in order for the newborn child to become a citizen at birth. February 21st, I met with our Congressman Dan Mooser in his office up in Pottsville. We thoroughly discussed the resolution and a course of action. And he was assured me he would look into it, and he did. March 11th, I received a letter from Representative Mooser, in which he discussed the history and the challenges of the 14th Amendment. That's all in the resolution. The 13th Amendment, well, the 13th was the slavery one. 14th was the situation with Indians on reservations that would like to be U.S. citizens. But they did not address the problem of illegal immigrants coming to this country, either across the ocean from China, pregnant, giving birth in the United States, declaring not a citizen, or they come across the Rio Grande. I'm not racist, I don't care where they're coming. They're here illegally, and they have a child in this country, it does not belong, should not become a U.S. citizen. It's that simple. May the 3rd, I was introduced in a conference call with John Gower of the Pottsville office and Patrick Rooney. And Patrick is the legislative director in his DC office. In that conversation, there were parameters obvious to both of us, notwithstanding the fact that the Rhinos, Republican name only, controlled both houses where no action was taken. And now that the Democrats have gained control, now the cry is out as the Democrats causing the problem. Well, we could have moved on it previously, and we didn't. Clearly, and for our resolution, a constitutional amendment is the most assured way, though most difficult, our founding fathers made it that way, to resolve the problem. As Mr. Rooney stated, quoting him, the resolution is incredibly well thought out. You did frame the issue rather well. He went on to say that he spoke with various groups in Washington, the Heritage Foundation, a major lobbyist group, and he talked to those in the Judiciary Committee. He concurred. It's not only a problem with the southern neighbors, but as he concurred, China coming across the ocean, flying in, having their child, and flying home again. Representative Steve King introduced a bill to try to put a stop to this, but the problem with the bill is the same as when Donald Trump took power. He voided all of those executive orders that were bills that became executive orders, and he got rid of a lot of them. If we do the same thing again, if a president comes into office in 2020 that does not see it our way, he'll do the same thing. So the answer is clearly a constitutional amendment. It takes 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate. I understand that. It's not easy, but it's the only way that's going to work and work permanently. The short action is we need to attack those that do not support a constitutional amendment to put an end to this. And we've written a letter, it's going to go out next week, going to every congressman and congresswoman and our senators in Pennsylvania, clearly defining their position. Are you for or against a bill that will put an end to anchor babies? Secondly, if it's onto the floor, would you vote for it? We're going to get those answers, and after we get those answers, the next step is to advertise the position of these Congress people and let them know and let others know where they stand. Be the intent that if we get the right candidates to run against incumbents that would not support this bill, it's a major piece of ammunition to use in our campaign to get rid of these folks and get people back in this government in D.C. that supports our Constitution and our rights. Thank you. Sam, I don't have the agenda in my hand. Who's on?
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here tonight. This has been one of the most interesting meetings that I have been to. I could go to a lot of this stuff, and some of them, you just like muddle through them. But this has been great. This has been really informative and fun. But I don't know if you remember, Sam and Linda were very gracious to invite me here about a year ago. And once again, they extended an invitation to me. And very briefly, try to be conscious of time too, but I had introduced a concept called Conversations on the Culture. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a radio station called WFYL, Working for Your Liberty. It's broadcast out of the Valley Forge area. We're the home of people like Ben Shapiro, Dana Lash, American Pastors Network, that would be Sam Moore. And we have Constitution Matters. We have Clay Brees. He has his own show every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. And we've got a lot of great programming on the Constitution, on American history. But one of the frustrations I found, I'm the host of a program called It's a New Day, and I found all we do is talk. We do a lot of talking, but we need to take it to the next level because the left, as we well know, they're out there doing. They're out there registering on our college campuses, George Soros money, at work. And so we need to take the talk and turn it into action. And I have met a lot of people over the last 4 years that are really top-notch people. And they have shown me how you can do liberty. And by the way, I stay away from conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, etc., etc. I talk about liberty. Why liberty is so much better than anything else that is available. And you're going to be hearing more about that when Joan talks. She will demonstrate that liberty is perfect. It is not, but it is far, far preferred. And I'm reminded, folks, in history, as we're seeing assaults on our Bill of Rights, yes? This isn't just idle talk, but we're seeing from the left, from certain quarters, our Bill of Rights being attacked daily. And when we go back to the Founding Fathers, those times, when taxation without representation was a major issue. These people were being treated as non-people. And of course, out of that came the Liberty Trees, because they were forbidden to meet in houses. So they say, okay, we'll find a tree and we'll go meet out there. Every colony had a Liberty Tree. And there they would air their grievances. And so the desire to quelch speech, thought, thinking, exchanging ideas, we see goes back years and years and years and years. Fast forward to something that I did research on back in October on the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. I don't know if we have any veterans in here from the Vietnam War, but they were a gruesome, horrible people. And I did some research on that, and the faces of some of those people haunt me to this day. But the one thing out of everything that I read that really stuck with me, that if 3 or more people were found just talking together, mind you, talking, they would disappear like that. Most of them were never seen again. For the crime of talking, for the crime of discussing, for the crime of thinking. Anybody else see any parallels to those times to now, to some of the voices we hear now? Am I off on a limb here, or, okay, all right. That can happen here. Well, it is happening. So the point of conversations on the culture is to engage people in talking, learning facts, and then going to their neighbors, their friends, and their relatives, and talking to them factually about issues. Let's take it up a notch. How many of you feel like you could benefit from some training? Well, we have an applied leadership conservative training coming up June 8th in Audubon, near King of Prussia. I have flyers back at that table back there. Please stop by and I'll give you one. It is, Jane Taylor told Citizens for Liberty, Dean Klopp, and others have said it is fantastic training. Become a better citizen activist. And no, I don't think I need to say it, but we don't smash windows, we don't torch limos and that type of thing. We work within the law and teach others the same thing. And lastly, our talk is doing liberty. How many of you are aware of what took place in the Exeter Library earlier this year with the, drag queen fairy story time? And we all were pretty like, oh my gosh. But then I happened to read an article called How to Teach Liberty to Kids. So I said to myself, Self, they can do what they want to do, and Joan guaranteed that I have the right to do this and to share with others like you, but we have the right to go to the library and say, we have a 15-minute presentation for kids on 5 meanings of liberty. Anybody here interested? Come stop at the table afterwards. Let's do what they do, right? It's on their turf. Those are just some of the ideas that we have. I am looking for citizen journalists. Anybody here go to township meetings? Anybody here go to school boards and want to take their phone and film themselves a 2-minute report and post it on Conversations on the Culture? I don't know about you, but it's really hard to find local news. It's hard to find what's going on in your community. It's hard to find who's running and what they think. Remember the old days of debates and all of that? So we'd like to have that on Conversations on the Culture, where we have debates, where we have candidates come on, we can learn about uber local issues, things that Action News and other stations don't think is worth covering. So if you'd like to find out more, stop by. You want to get on the mailing list. Sam and Linda have been very gracious supporters of us. We are a membership base because we're not funded except through $25 a year membership, so hopefully you don't think that's horrible. But I'd like to introduce someone I consider a good friend of mine, Joan London, she did give a presentation back in February, and
Very
Sam.
well. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about Joan, for those of you who do not know her. Besides being a wonderful person, she's a shareholder with the firm of Kozloff Stout Professional Corporation of Berks County, PA, practicing in the areas of municipal law, land use, employment law, and appellate practice. Born in Philadelphia, she's a graduate of Villanova University with a BA and MA in political science and a JD from the Dickinson School of Law in Carlisle. Joan is a member of the Berks County and Pennsylvania Bar Association. She's a past chair of the Municipal Law Section of the PBA and currently serves as a member of the PBA House of Delegates. Joan is the current president of the Berks County Bar Association. You still are, aren't you, Joan?
Immediate past.
Okay. All right. And she served as its treasurer from 2003 to 2006 and previously served as chair of its municipal, education, environmental, real estate section. Joan has planned and taught seminars offered by the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, the Albright College Center for Excellence in Local Government, the Berks County Bar Association, the Society for Human Resources Management, and the Pennsylvania Housing Alliance. These programs have addressed topics including validity challenges to land use ordinances, zoning for agricultural preservation, the Sunshine Act, the Right to Know Law, wage and hour law, employment discrimination, and blighted property remediation. Joan co-authored a chapter titled Meetings and Records for the Solicitor's Handbook, published by the Governor's Center for Local Government Services of the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, and co-authored a cover article for the May-June 2013 issue of the Pennsylvania Lawyer magazine, Emerging from the Red, What to Do About Municipalities in Financial Trouble. Joan is a resident of Wyomissing, PA. Joan?
Kim, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I want to thank Christian Leinbach for sponsoring tonight. I really appreciate it. And I especially want to thank Sam and Linda Brangadora for this invitation to speak tonight. I tremendously appreciate the opportunity because this is a subject that is very dear to my heart, and that is the future of this country, teaching teens and young adults to walk away from socialism, because as Rod said, he's standing there taking pictures, thank you very much. Make me look tall and thin, please, very important. Same with you, Sam. It is so, socialism is, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, the gateway drug to communism, but I think history proves it to be the case. It robs us of your liberty, it robs people of their humanity, and it goes against human nature. And that's why it's so important that we teach the impressionable young people why it's wrong. And here's what you're not going to hear tonight. And I think that what you're going to hear is important when you're not going to hear. You're not going to hear about snowflakes, participation trophy generation, they're slackers, because I look in this room and I see that many of you are baby boomers, or as I am, Generation X. And what did the older generation call the baby boomers? Called y'all spoiled. What did baby boomers and others call Generation X as we were coming up in the 80s and 90s? Called us slackers. But we weren't. We didn't like that at all. There's good and bad in every generation, and I think that the most important thing we can do if we're going to influence the next generation coming up is show them the respect that we would want to be shown. Show that we have high expectations, that they are intelligent, and engage in straight talk most of all. And this is what this is about, because the only way you can engage in intelligent straight talk is to know the history of socialism, to know why it might be seductive to this generation, and to know the values of this generation, because yes, they are different in a lot of ways, and you can tell looking at them sometimes. You'll see them looking down at their phones and all that, but you know what, I see quite a few, you hear about, you think of texting while driving, for example. It's the teenage girls, teenagers have it. See an awful lot of grown men doing it. a lot of adults, so let's be careful about stereotypes, but yes, they do seem different, they do look different, their values are different. We'll talk about that tonight.
I want to give one disclaimer, and that is Kim, in her introduction of me, talked about some of my affiliations. Yes, I'm on the board of the Berks Bar Association. I'm a shareholder with my firm, and I'm a member of Republican State Committee. I am speaking as Joan, Bar Association, and not as a partisan Republican. The opinions you hear tonight are mine. This is not legal advice, and this is not the position of anyone else. So I want to get that straight. I think that that's very important. What we're going to talk about tonight is socialism, its history, and convincing you to just walk away from socialism. Just walk away is a recent movement of the last couple of years to convince young adults to move away from the identity politics and pigeonholing and stereotyping and victimhood of liberalism. But I think it applies just as much. To socialism. So we're going to talk about that tonight, and we're going to have to talk first about history. Now I have to apologize. We had a PowerPoint prepared. Unfortunately, we've had a technological glitch, and we didn't have any millennials in the room to help. So that's right. Well, it's just like when we first got VCRs. What would you say? Ask your 10-year-old. And it's the same thing. We didn't have a millennial in the room. So unfortunately, we're not going to have the PowerPoint. But the first time I gave this presentation, which was also for Kim and for Conversations on the Culture, which is a wonderful series, and I want it to succeed, and I will help any way I can, and I hope you all will help any way you can with this series, because information is everything. But I'm going to ask that the PowerPoint presentation be put on the website, possibly a link on the Patriots Facebook page, because I would like you to have the benefit of it. There's going to be some material here from sources that you're probably not used to. Sources like the New York Times, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. These are not generally thought of as conservative-friendly sources. Don't be afraid of these sources. We can't be influencers unless we know the sources of information that they know. Show we're secure enough in our conservative views to read them, and that we're not closed-minded, and this is one way that we can show it. And sometimes, within the articles and the spin they put in those articles, there's data in those articles that is very important to us and shows that the facts are that socialism is ruinous of freedom and leads to misery and leads to poverty, and that capitalism leads to prosperity. And we'll see some of those sources tonight. Let's reject stereotypes. And one of those stereotypes that we need to reject is about conservatives having a closed mind. Sometimes it's just the opposite. Sometimes we're the more open-minded, and we're seeing that lately an awful lot. We're seeing an awful lot of suppression of conservative speech by the left. Let's be better than that. Let's be above the stereotypes. And we'll talk about some of that. To understand the younger generations, we have to know who they are. And we're talking about several subsets. I talked about the baby boom generation, which was the post-war generation, 1947 to 1965. Generation X, which is my generation, as you see by these glasses, I'm 51, unfortunately. Oh well. They were, the Generation X is 65 to about 1981. Millennials are a 15-year generation formed between 1981 and 1996. Really two phases of it called Generation Y and Generation Z. And then there's what a recent book calls iGen. I as in iPhone or iPad. Born 1996 to 2012. And it's a new term for what we'll call a digitally accustomed generation. But let's talk about the later millennials, Generation Z, and the iGen. What are their values? Because we need to know that. There was an article by Alex McFarland online called 8 Values That Drive Millennials, and it was published on May 22nd, 2016 in alexmcfarland.com. What are some of their values? One called meaningful work, work that makes a difference, and seeming to make a difference is important to them. with a balance between home life and work life. And maybe sometimes that's what makes them seem to not want to work that hard. But it's not true. They just work differently, maybe more in a more flexible way. Collaboration. They're less comfortable with individual effort and initiative in a lot of ways, and more comfortable working as a team. The one we know best, staying connected. Very comfortable with social networking. That's why you always see the heads in the phone, texting, all of that. Staying connected with their friends is very important. But it also means they're comfortable with things that you and I find uncomfortable, possibly even unsafe. We first heard about Uber. When you first heard about Uber, were you horrified by the idea? And then you kind of came around to it. And another one, Airbnb, staying in somebody else's home that you met online, dating online, all of those things, you hear about them, and those of us of my generation and older were probably horrified by the thought, but this generation is very comfortable and it's part of staying connected. Another value, social justice. Unfortunately, that term has been badly hijacked, and many of them believe the left's version, and unfortunately they're being taught that in really from early on in school, and certainly in college. And the term has been hijacked. Everybody believes in social justice, but there's a difference between being just and fair and treating people fairly and not judging somebody on something along the lines of their race or their ethnicity, which is what social justice is, treating everybody as equal and treating everybody as you would want to be treated, and an equality of, a demanded equality of result. That's a redistributive vision of justice, and unfortunately that's how the term has been hijacked. Their values include diversity. They're a very diverse generation, and they're more accepting of differences than other generations. I think we can learn from that, really. I think that is a good value. We can learn from that, but that doesn't mean affirmative action, and unfortunately sometimes that means to them, they're taught that means that it has to be forced rather than learned and believed. Diversity should come from accepting other views and accepting other people and other backgrounds. It should come from the heart, not from the government. They're spiritual, but not necessarily religious. I think we all know that participation in mainstream churches and mainstream religion has declined, and that's part of it. Education, that is part of their values. They're the most educated generation. Unfortunately, sometimes not the most skilled generation, and there's a difference between education and skills. And if you want to be successful, you need both, but education is very important to them. I can't say much about liberal arts degrees as a person with a bachelor's and master's in political science, but I had to go on to law school and then get jobs to develop my skills over time. And if I start lapsing into land use, please smack me, because this is an unusual night for me, to not be sitting at a table giving opinions as to whether you need a motion for that or that has to be advertised. I mean, Rob knows my background and my former firm rather well, don't you, Rob? Skepticism. And skepticism, again, it can be a positive or it can be a negative. It's good to be an educated consumer it's good to be an educated consumer in the marketplace of ideas. It's good to have a healthy degree of skepticism. You shouldn't just accept what's taught to you, but their skepticism has led them places to be skeptical of what should be first principles. To me, in my opinion, God and country should be first principles. And sadly, that isn't as prevalent among the younger generation. And I think that in many ways it's their loss, but it's also ours. It's led to what is called a repurposing of the term capitalism in favor of socialism. That the source of that is a very well-titled article by Courtney Linder from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about a year ago. It's called "Capitalism Has Become a Dirty Word Among Millennials. It's Not Because of the Avocado Toast." The favorite snack of the millennial with their Starbucks coffee. All products of capitalism, by the way. But the term capitalism has been repurposed, according to this article, as the cause of their problems. They think of student loan debt, and they think of the problems that they have finding a job as capitalism, and it's become fashionable to be skeptical of capitalism, to even condemn capitalism, and it's no longer considered unpatriotic. When I was growing up, and probably during the time when most of you were growing up, you called somebody a communist. That was a dirty word. It was like calling somebody a redneck or a racist. It was a terrible thing to call a person, and it went to the core, and it was hurtful. And now if you call somebody a socialist or a communist, well, they might be just running for president for all you know. Another one just announced today. Have you heard that de Blasio has announced today? That's unfortunate. I think most of you in this room, or many of you in this room, are my friends on Facebook, and you know what I had to say about it. It's a way to spread nanny-statism, socialism, and disrespect for law enforcement on a national scale. Have Jim Kenney as his running mate and Larry Krasner for his Attorney General. That's what's coming next, but I'm digressing. But another reason that it's not such a term of abuse to call someone a socialist or communist now is that they don't have the memory of what communism was. They don't remember the Soviet Union. They don't remember the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. They don't remember that. They don't remember, Kim was talking about Pol Pot. I think it's a good reason that maybe those of you who are parents should show your children or your grandchildren the movie The Killing Fields. It's raw, it's graphic, it's ugly. It's got some leftist slant because the subject is a reporter for the New York Times. But watch it anyway, because who was killed? Educated people. Dit Pran was a journalist and a doctor. He was a physician, and he survived because he led the government to believe that he was a farmer. He didn't tell anybody that he was a physician. Had they known he was a physician, he would have been dead and he would not have been able to escape. But the educated people were the first ones to go. And they don't remember that. They don't remember any of it. And I think that if they knew about it, maybe they would look at it differently. We looked at it as something totalitarian. They don't see it that way. I think one of the best insights into socialism was given by Ronald Reagan. And when all else, you resort to Ronald Reagan, as a source of wisdom. And he said, socialism only works in two places: in heaven where they don't need it, and in hell where they already have it. Yep. And that's really one of the best insights into socialism. He had the best approach. Some humor that had the basis of truth. And socialism really is that there's a Bible passage that some use to justify socialism on earth, but it's really aspirational to the kingdom of heaven, and it's Acts chapter 4, verse 32. All of the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. But that, again, that's aspirational to the kingdom of heaven. Socialism in heaven where they already have it. That's not intended for here on earth. It reminds me quite a bit of the lyrics to the John Lennon song, Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven, but imagine the people living for today. When there is no God, everybody just sort of lives for today. I think those of you who are parents warn your kids about the dangers and the pleasures of the moment living for today. Mine certainly did. And that's what happens when there is no future orientation. There's no fear of later consequences. Imagine no countries, but imagine no religion. Imagine no possessions. And imagine someday the world will be as one. What does that sound like? One world government. Look, this takes nothing away from John Lennon, his talent, his music. I wouldn't take anything away, and nobody deserved to die the way he did. But be an informed consumer of what you're listening to, because it's in the music. It permeates the culture, and it has for a very long time. Kim mentioned and Sam mentioned times that socialism has been a failure in the early Americas. There has been socialist thought and pushback against socialist thought for many years, since the days of ancient Greek philosophy and Plato. Plato believed in communal ownership of land and property. He believed there was no right to buy, sell, or subdivide land. And no, that is not talking land use, so you don't have to come up and hit me. Children were communal property under Plato's thought. But Aristotle and his view was counter to that. His view was, and this is why PowerPoint would have been good. Can't separate papers with long nails. I hate it when I see people do that. It makes me sick. So you gotta bear with me on that one. He believed that private property was better managed. I remember in high school philosophy class reading a quote from Aristotle: if everybody owns everything, no one will take care of anything. And that left an impression on me. Of course, I was lucky enough in my high school, I went to Upper Merion, to have a philosophy teacher who, unlike most social science teachers, was a conservative. He was a Korea and Vietnam War veteran, retired military officer. So I was fortunate that way. I had both strong role models as a conservative, as a young person, 15, 16, 17 years old. I don't know that life is so wonderful for a 17-year-old or conservative these days. I was lucky to have come up in the 80s, in the Reagan era, where at least the views were considered intellectually equal, and it was cool to be patriotic. And I was fortunate that way. But I remember in philosophy class reading that quote, because a lot of philosophers were utopians and were socialists, but this was refreshing. And then Aristotle said, if there's no private property, how could individuals decide to give to those in need? The word he interestingly used is, where's the room for liberality? He used the word liberality, but he used it in terms of personal initiative as opposed to forced altruism, which is what socialism really is. It's a form of forced altruism. He believed in private education, private medicine, because he understood that even in 400 BC, he understood what works for one might not work so well for another. There were others. You think of Karl Marx when you think of socialism of the 19th century. Fourier, he was a French utopian thinker. He considered trade to be the root of all evil, and he was virulently anti-Semitic about those who engaged in trade. Many were Jewish, and he was virulently anti-Semitic. So the idea of the socialist as the broad-minded one and the conservative as the one who was prejudiced has been turned on its head from an early day. And again, we need to view people as individuals, not as a group. But he believed trade was the root of all evil, and he hated those who engaged in trade, even though trade is what keeps us prosperous. Private property, he considered the cause of disorder in society. He wanted higher wages and what he called a decent minimum. What does that remind you of? Those who want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Of course, it will keep people on the bottom rung of the ladder and raise consumer prices, but and to quote Al Gore, that's an inconvenient truth. Another one, Pierre Proudhon, in the 1850s and 60s, property is theft. That was his quote. He believed in nationalization of land and workplaces. Socialism was tried in Britain and the Americas with communities, which all failed. The first one was Robert Owen, or one of them was Robert Owen, lived in the late 18th to mid-19th centuries. He's a British utopian thinker, believed in what was called a new moral order. That, again, something that sounds familiar. He established experimental communities, one called New Harmony and one called New Lanark in the United States. Children over 3 were raised by the community, and there was communal enjoyment of the results of work by the community. And it failed. As Sam was pointing out about the early American colonies, which were on the principles of socialism. Marx and Engels, the Communist Manifesto, is where we generally think of the beginnings of communism and socialism. Class struggle as the history of all society and civilization. They advocated for the abolition of private property, abolition of hired work, also advocated for some things that you're hearing about now. Free stuff that Raj was talking about. Free public education, progressive taxation, abolishing inheritance. They believed that what would come about would be the establishment of a classless society. That was the aim of the Communist Manifesto. Socialism and communism believe in the government and the end as the substitute for God. Karl Marx said that religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. Vladimir Lenin from Russia called religion a sort of spiritual booze. Again, seeing government and seeing the state above the person instead of God above the person. Communism in the 20th century became a state-sanctioned ideology. You think of the Soviet Union, Lenin and then Stalin, Eastern Europe and the Iron Curtain after World War II, China under Chairman Mao, and the Third World, Cuba under Castro, 90 miles from our shores, North Korea under Kim Il-sung and his son and grandson, and Cambodia under Pol Pot. And one way that those who push socialism is to say, well, those were just totalitarian communist states. They weren't true socialism. And true socialism is found in Western Europe and Scandinavia. And they use Denmark and Sweden as the examples. Denmark and Sweden, their governments will be the first to tell you. Those are market economies. Yes, they have a social safety net and they have social welfare programs. Those are supported by tax dollars, and they're being found to be not particularly sustainable. And those countries are moving to the right, as it's found throughout Europe that these are not sustainable. But they are free market capitalist states. They have very high taxes, but they are free market capitalist states. They are not the socialist paradises. They have social problems just like any other country. They are not true socialism. And what has happened in Europe over the past several years shows that even these paradises can fall. Yes?
And their suicide rates are very high.
Yes, they are. In Scandinavia in particular, the suicide, depression, and alcoholism rates are very high. Of course, if we're cold and dark 6 months of the year, maybe you would get depressed and drink a lot too. I don't know if there's a whole lot else to do when it's cold and dark all the time. Communism on a grand scale, just like on the small scales with utopian communities, on the grand scale, it failed too. It didn't last. Think of the events of 1989 to 1991. In 1987, Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, in 1989, the wall got torn down by the people, and then it came down by the government. I think many of you remember this particular image. It's on the PowerPoint, but I think many of you remember the image of that night in October of 1989 of everyone celebrating that Berlin was one city. 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. But as it's fallen out of favor in the rest of the world, it seems to be gaining traction among young people here. Why? I think there are several reasons. I think it appeals to the natural idealism, the values, collaboration, social justice, meaningful work, making a difference. It provides easy answers, emotionally appealing. The rich have so much, more than they need. Why shouldn't they pay for my college education? And it has a promise of equality for all. And that has an appeal, especially for, teenagers often feel out of place, often feel like outliers, and it has that appeal. Well, does that sound familiar to you? I mean, gangs do that, religious cults, hate groups, ISIS, terrorist organizations, all of them recruit. They're all looking for the outliers and the idealistic. They promise love and equality. How do you think Jonestown got started? How do you think they came to drink the Kool-Aid? It didn't happen overnight. It was a promise of a utopia where everybody was equal and those who felt left out had a place. But pretty soon, it became a small totalitarian state, and people tragically took orders. ISIS, we know that it recruits online. You ever get these Facebook friend requests from people who live overseas, have no connection to you and no reason to be contacting you? Hit delete. Not today, ISIS. Not today. But they're phishing. You know, PHISHING, they're phishing for the teenager who is looking for acceptance. And tragically, especially among young women, they found it and they've gotten themselves into a lot of trouble and looking to be gotten out of a terrible situation overseas. But socialism does the same thing. Maybe they're not recruiting online, maybe they're not ISIS, but they're destructive. And what's making it attractive, what's softened them? Liberal educators, clergy, collective guilt, moral relativism, the social institutions. We all saw in school. Remember being taught that America has 6% of the land area in the world, but uses something like 2/3 of the resources, make us feel guilty. Of course, they leave out that how many jobs have been created, our production of goods, making consumer goods available, making safety and sanitation and health and medicine, all of those things available throughout the world, all the good we've done. They left that out. They just say, it was just a message of you pigs. That was kind of the message. Why do we have so much? And with the undertone being it should be redistributed. And don't think that the climate change police and the UN aren't doing the same thing, that this isn't a hook to make us feel guilty and allow for a certain amount of rationing of resources. There's an emphasis on past wrongs in the United States. We have past wrongs. There have been things that have been done. Slavery, segregation, race relations, treatment of Native American peoples. We have scars, we have warts, but we are more open about them than many other countries. The slave trade came from Europe. We looked for ways to stop the slave trade. It took time, it took a war, but it stopped. We have been more open about these things, but unfortunately that openness and that study of it has unfortunately turned into those who want to use collective guilt. Every nation has its wrongs and scars. We are no different, but we're better because we try to do better, and we have a government with institutions, with checks and balances that is able to right wrongs, and a free press that's able to expose wrongs. And that's why we are exceptional, in fact, and nobody should take that away. And that's something that has to be emphasized to you. It's all right to consider your country exceptional. Every country considers itself exceptional, and we should be no different. We should walk with our heads high. And that's something that should be taught to kids. Some examples, just from the past 15 years or so. Andrew Cuomo saying that America was never that great. Or if you remember Professor Ward Churchill blaming America in the days after the 9/11 attacks. Everybody else was understanding the importance of putting God and country first. But he said that chickens have come home to roost. Or what about President Obama's spiritual advisor, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, after 9/11 saying we should be saying God damn America as opposed to God bless America. And that kind of thinking, unfortunately, has seeped into our culture. The Soviet Union, over the years, and believed that they could soften and soften and soften, and we would just accept it. Nikita Khrushchev apocryphally said that Americans were gullible, won't accept it outright, but we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally accept it and you wake up and already have communism. It is a softening process. It's questionable whether he said it or not, but he could have. Any number of people could have said that, and it is the truth, because it is a softening process, and that's why I call socialism the gateway drug to communism. There's a messaging that capitalism is for boring old guys, and you think of, Barack Obama used to spread that, and now we've got AOC saying that with her Green New Deal, it's going to eliminate a lot of private car ownership, eliminate air travel, and lose a lot of jobs in the process. Or Barack Obama saying that he is going to transform America and get rid of the fundamentally unforgiving nature of capitalism. It's for boring old guys, but the truth is rather inconvenient. Who are the leading socialists right now? Bernie Sanders, and now Bill de Blasio, both self-proclaimed socialists. Old guys, old white guys, and yes, millionaires, and yes, Senator Sanders made quite a bit of money from the book. He feels he should keep that, but the rest of us, not so much. Capitalism is for me, but not for thee. But unfortunately, this is a message that's getting across positively. Among 18 to 29-year-olds have positive feelings, 51% have positive feelings about socialism, as opposed to 45% having positive feelings for capitalism. The 2016 study by the Kennedy School of Public Policy at Harvard, only 42% of 18 to 29-year-olds surveyed say they support a society based on capitalism. And what do they see, Rod? Free stuff. Student loans forgiven, like Elizabeth Warren says. Free college, free community college, free bachelor's degree. Of course, what's the MBA going to cost then? Medicare for all. All sorts of free stuff. Some point to Cuba as a great example of everybody having medical care and food and shelter. And an education system, so they give you food, clothing, and shelter, and they take away your freedom. That doesn't seem to be a fair trade to me. Communism and socialism, you have to tell them, and you have to be straight with them. It looks good on paper, but the programs aren't sustainable. Look at the riots in Greece caused by the pension crisis. People were retiring at 53, and really they would be because there weren't a lot of jobs anyway, and on a state-supported pension. In Venezuela, oil prices dropped, and social spending bankrupted the country. It was sustainable as long as the oil prices were inflated. Once that dropped, the bottom dropped out, and now there's starvation, lack of basic services, lack of medicine. People are starving, rumors of cannibalizing the zoo. That's not a utopian paradise. Communism and socialism spread mediocrity and then misery and poverty around. They don't improve the standard of living. The World Bank estimates, and I'm going to just read this, bear with me, in 1980, 50% of the world population lived in abject poverty. By 2015, with the fall of communism and spread of free market institutions, less than 10% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. Since 1970, the percentage of the world's population living on the equivalent of less than $1 a day has fallen by more than 80%. Hundreds of millions of people have been pulled out of grinding deprivation. That was a study by Arthur Berks in 2012. Heritage Foundation estimates that in China, which, although it is still totalitarian, has become more of a capitalist economy, 400 million people were pulled out of absolute poverty between 1981 and 2000, thanks to free trade and foreign investments. An article from the Heritage Foundation called Eradicate Poverty, We Already Know How. But I think that also a way to talk to younger people about what's not to like about socialism is hit it where it hurts. They want their independence and their freedom, but it gives the government power over nearly every aspect of your life. Let them see that first paycheck. Let them see how much is taken out in taxes. It overregulates business, economic, and personal life choices. They want privacy. They certainly want privacy from parents. Privacy can't coexist with big government. It takes away choices. If the government is paying for your education and your health care, it gets to make decisions, not you. The government may pay for your college. Eventually that may happen. But the government may decide that there's too many people majoring in what you're interested in. So if you want it paid for, you got to major in something else that you may not like so much and may not be as talented in. The government gets to make those decisions. It's called the golden rule. He that makes the gold, has the gold, makes the rules. And that's true for government programs. Every government program comes with strings attached. I think above all, though, communism kills people, and that cannot be emphasized enough. I heard the word 20 million. Stalin killed 20 million, more than Hitler. Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge, 3 million. China and the Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao, 2 million. I have 5 more minutes, I'm talking too much, I know. Kim Il-sung in North Korea, approximately 1.6 million, and counting under Kim Jong-un. It's not a utopian paradise. This is the part of the presentation, last 5 minutes, because Sam has told me I have the last 5 minutes. We could talk all night about this, but I won't do that. What is walk away movement? How do you convince them to walk away? Walk Away is a social media campaign. It was launched in 2018 by Brandon Straka, who's a former liberal. He's an openly gay man, a hairstylist, an actor from New York. He wanted to encourage others after he had discovered that it was better to walk away from the divisive left, take back the narrative from the liberal media about what it means to be a conservative in America. And I think the takeaway from this needs to be, if you want to encourage your children, your grandchildren, younger people that you teach and you have influence over, to just walk away. Be informed on the issues. Support your position with facts and figures. Don't say, for example, under President Trump, we've added hundreds of thousands of jobs last year. Say instead, as an example of job growth, the New York Times reported that in October 2018, there were 250,000 jobs created. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the unemployment rate at 3.8%. As of last month, unemployment was at 3.6%, which is considered full employment by economist standards. Don't just talk in rhetoric. And that's something else about this. Don't tie yourself to any person, including President Trump, because there are different views on the president or anybody else. People come and go. Ideas are forever. So tie yourself to ideas. And maybe you're not going to get them to be conservatives right away. They tend to be libertarian on social issues. You don't have to talk about that. That's not a battle to fight. They may make their own decisions on these things as they get older. Maybe they have children themselves, and they get concerned about what's being taught in school and what values are being taught, and many other things. That'll take care of itself. But you want to teach them a basic respect for our system of economics, for our American culture and exceptionalism, and you want to teach them to understand how our government works. Support the teaching of civics in the schools because we need it. Support the teaching of the Constitution. But other ways to encourage them to walk away. Use humor. Channel Reagan on that one. When responding to Hillary Clinton's statements about women who voted for Donald Trump because their husbands said so, which is frankly rather insulting to me as a woman, independent professional woman I am, and you say, well, my husband didn't make me vote for Donald Trump. Bill Clinton's wife did. Appeal to their independence. Do you want to be pigeonholed, like Mr. Stark? Do you want to be pigeonholed as a member of an identity group? Or do you want to be thought of as an individual? I think, do you want to be viewed as a victim for someone else's benefit? Or do you want to be viewed as a victor? And that's something that's important to me as a woman, because I've never viewed myself as a victim one day. I view myself as a victor, not a victim. And I think that we want to encourage that kind of thinking. Counter the stereotypes. Conservatives are all about rich people. Republicans don't care about poverty or racism. Know the facts of who and what we are. Republicans are the party of Lincoln, who championed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Democrats opposed those amendments. Conservatives tend to be more philanthropic, according to the Journal of Philanthropy. In 2012 study, they found that there was more charitable giving in the states that had voted for Romney in the 2012 election than in those who voted for Barack Obama. So get rid of the stereotypes about narrow-mindedness, being bigoted, being uncharitable, not caring about anybody. We do care. We just don't believe that the government program is the solution. We stand for educational choice and economic opportunity because we believe everyone deserves the opportunity to succeed. We believe that we accept, as George W. Bush said, the soft bigotry of low expectations. We consider you to be an intelligent, thinking person. We do not consider you to be slugs living in your parents' basement, no matter what anybody says. We want them to be informed consumers in the market of ideas. We need to tell them, choose freedom over free stuff. Thank you.
Joan has more time. We just haven't set aside some time for questions, so this would be the time. Do you have any questions?
I got a question.
Okay. Okay, wow.
Joan, I was particularly admiring when you said C-54. C-54 gave Russians the idea that we were serious. Remember saying that?
I did. I said that.
C-54 is a transfer plane.
That's right. I was at, what Matt is referring to, I think many of you in this room are friends of mine on Facebook. I think half the world is. It's kind of getting out of control. I think I may have to go to a 12-step program for it. But Matt has been a close personal friend of mine for years, as well, and knew my husband Walt, who I was hoping would be here tonight, but he has errands to run. But Matt has known him for years. I've enjoyed appearing on Matt's Habitat. But what Matt's referring to is that Walt and I were at the air show at Joint Base Andrews over the weekend and saw many different aircraft, B-52 bombers, F-16 fighters, helicopters, Customs and Border Patrol aircraft. But one of them that left a big impression on me was the C-54 transport plane that was used in the Berlin airlift. And that was on display at the base, and you could walk through it. It's preserved as a museum, and it's beautiful. And the Berlin airlift in 1948 was when we showed the Soviet Union that we were serious about not allowing them to blockade Berlin. And we flew those planes in and out of Berlin with supplies, lasted for a couple of years, I believe, at least months, maybe years. And we lost people, unfortunately, which I hadn't known. We lost about 34 people in that. But the Berlin airlift, those who participated in the Berlin airlift were absolute heroes. Maybe they weren't World War II or Korea veterans. They were Cold War veterans. And they did amazing things. And this country at that time had the resolve to fight communism. And they showed that we were very serious. So thank you, Matt, for an excellent question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I appreciated your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
I happened to spend a month and a half in the last 2 years in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
I just completed Around the World in 30 days, and I spent my time on the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian Federation that is called today, you could guarantee that there'll never be communism again. I was with the people every day at a different place. I study Russia, and there's never going to be a communism again in Russia.
That is good news, because they've experienced it. They know the scarcity of it. I mean, even China went through what was called the Cultural Revolution, which was neither cultural nor a revolution, but killed 2 million people at least. And after that, they realized that the term was used, you can't have a socialism of scarcity. And that the only way to grow the economy and not have misery spread everywhere is to have a free market economy. And the free market economy did exist in many ways in these countries, it just exists as a black market. But they had to bring it to out in the open so that there could be greater prosperity. Thank you. Anyone else?
Another question? Anybody else?
Rod, yes.
You mentioned, and I mentioned, free stuff.
Yes.
Cutting to the chase, getting rid of political ideology. I look at the group from 25 years and younger, not having that free stuff yet, and they see everybody above have that stuff, and their only concept is, we got to change the way the government works so I get my share, and it has nothing to do with political ideology.
I don't think it really does have a lot to do with political ideology, but socialism is the ideology that promises the free stuff fast. What do you have? You have Elizabeth Warren talking about free college education and student loan forgiveness. The problem with giving away anything for free is that anything that's free loses its value. It has no value anymore. You give away a college education for free, well, it's going to become the equivalent of a high school diploma. It's going to be, you're going to need more education that's going to cost even more. And free stuff really isn't free because somebody else always pays. Someone always pays. There is no free ride, free lunch, or free stuff. But unfortunately, I can't completely blame this generation because they grew up somewhat used to it online when online content was given away for free. Anybody else?
Going once? Going twice? Anybody? Anybody? There you go.
Yes.
I think the way I understand socialism, I think if you explain it to younger people, they might understand.
Use the mic.
Yeah. Forward here. Go ahead.
Right now, 20% of the people in this country control about 80% of the wealth. And young people see that as wrong. We should even it out. But in socialism, 20% of those people control 80% of the wealth, but they're government officials. Now, in this country, the people that control the wealth use it to pay paychecks, build factories, build stores, R&D products and services, fight disease. That's what they use the money. In socialism, they use it to build houses, buy yachts themselves, fire their relatives, and everybody just eats dirt. Okay? So the people that don't know how to use money have money. People in this country that know how to use money have money. But that's why rich people don't get rich because all of a sudden a big home shows up. They know how to make it. And an awful lot of rich people, this happened to me when I was young. I lived down Pottstown. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Pottstown. But back in the 60s, there was a man named Twinehart down there who was a big realtor. And he was a money man. He rolled these big real estate deals, sold a hospital, land for a hospital. Did, big things real estate wise. He's worth millions of dollars. So he's, as some men like Bill Clinton had this problem, he's caught in bed with someone else's wife, and the guy didn't appreciate this and killed him there. Okay? So his estate went down. Now here's the guy who's spent $1 million a year, has yachts, has another Cadillac. When he was settled his estate, he was worth $15 million, but he owed $16 million. So a lot of rich people are rich on paper. They're rich, and as long as you let them have the money, as long as you let them roll, they're making money. They're hiring people that build factories. You kill a gold goose today, the gold name ain't going to earn by age. Okay, so instantly, everybody that worked for him was all real estate is just not rich. Here's 25, 30 people working full time for him, no following. So you can't take those people's money away and expect everything else to just go along.
No, and the problem is, as Margaret Thatcher says, the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. You also run out of rich people because rich people are very mobile. You raise the taxes too high, they move elsewhere, across state lines, across national lines. So there's a good reason to, as a small business owner that I know said, leave rich people alone. Let them spend their money. And this was a small business person. This was not someone who was engaged in big business said that to me. And I think it makes a lot of good sense. In socialism, the government owns all of the means of production. Government is not efficient. It's just not efficient. It's sometimes necessary. It's certainly necessary for building infrastructure. It's certainly necessary for defense. Those are legitimate functions of government. You sometimes hear liberals say, well, you're driving on socialist roads and you're receiving socialist mail is it military socialist providing for common defense? No, those are functions of government. There are functions of government. But redistributing wealth is not a good function of government. And again, the government program is not the be-all and end-all as a solution for poverty. There are many better ways to end poverty, and one of them is private and faith-based initiatives, which say to people who need help, you were created in the image of God. God does not make junk. Don't junk yourself. You can do better than this, and this is how you can do better than this. Build these skills, and you can do better. And that's the best way out of poverty. Look at the programs that have worked over time. And I think that that's a lot better than a government program. Sometimes a government program is a good way for simple relief in a tough situation. But in the long term, that's not the be-all and end-all. And that's what I've said very often, is conservatives get the stereotype of not caring. It's not that we don't care, it's just that we don't believe that the government is the solution to every problem.
Thank you, Joan. Folks, let's give Joan a big welcome. Thank you, Joan. Okay, we also thank you, kid, as well. Also, we will put Joan's presentation on our website, possibly on YouTube. We'll see where we're going to. And we'll also bring some copies at our next meeting as well. Okay? Thank you again, Joan. Appreciate it. Okay? Before we do the raffle, we do have a few announcements. I want to bring up someone. Rudy, come on up. Folks, the best way for us to succeed is that all groups need to work together on common causes. Rudy is the chairman of the Berks Oath Keepers, which Linda and I go to and some other members go to here. I just wanted to introduce Rudy, and he can also mention a meeting that he has coming up.
I'm involved with Berks County News Keepers, and I'd like to bring to attention, we are having radio classes starting this Sunday at 5, and we'll be skipping every other Sunday. There's going to be 3 classes. They're 5 to 8 p.m. Basically, we want people to get a ham license and get used to operating radios in case of an emergency. Because if things really get bad, there will be no cell phones, and it will be running communication. I have handouts, in fact, on the table there. You can stop back and get them.
Thanks, Rudy. Folks, he was talking about the ham radios. They're going to have that for the next, I think, several months. They go way beyond that. There's all kinds of different other subjects that they cover. So if that's not something for you at this particular time, you can still go to the other meetings. We will put this information up on our website. Before I turn this part of it over to Linda, I just want to let you know that next month, we're having Bobby Lawrence. The title is America is Under Direct Attack. You can fill in whatever blanks you want. Also, we have District Justice Dean Patton will be here as well. Linda, you want to do the raffle?
$70. Excuse me. 862-830. Last 3, 830. Anybody?
Way back here.
Good. $70 to you. Okay. You got it. Also, having a Leesport memorial service at 1 o'clock on Monday, May 27th at the Walt Pearson Field. I'm not sure who the memorial service is for. I would think it's for veterans, but I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. Also, on Election Day, which is Tuesday, if anybody has some spare time, we need somebody at the GOP headquarters to answer phones for 1 hour or 2 hour, whatever you can give. We really need some help there. If anybody has the time, please see Julie or me in the back. Okay? Okay, and now for our closing. The trumpets. The trumpets.
Most of you know that the Yankees and the Flyers no longer play Kate Smith's God Bless America because of something she sang in the 1930s that truly horrifies all of us. So we can't possibly listen to Kate singing that song anymore. And don't you have to wonder, well then why did they replace that song by another artist? You have to wonder, is this just another way to get God and our patriotism out of the public arena? So, since here we are in a public area, I'd really like to invite all of you to stand up. None of us are Kate Smith, but let's all try to sing the best we can. Oh, so she is, okay. So, please stand up and let's all try to sing our best for God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night by the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with snow.
Safe drive home. I hope to see you next month. And don't forget, the trumpets will be in the back.